Hey there, hope you're having a wonderful day. In this video, we're going to be creating Candy Crush from scratch using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So what you see here is the final product that you'll have by the end of this video. You can see we have a score and we have our game board over here. So I can swap any two adjacent pieces, for example, these two, this orange and purple, and you can see the candies get crushed and new ones come down. I can do the same here and here and here and so on, and the score goes up every time you crush candies. And you can find a link to the repo down below in the description, and I suggest you download the repo and grab the image folder and the background image and continue along with the rest of this tutorial. So when you download the repo, you should see the images folder and this background image that we'll be using for our web page. In the images folder, you can see we have a bunch of candy pieces. In this tutorial, I'm only going to use the basic ones. So this blue, this orange, this green. We're not going to do any combination. I'll let you figure that one out after you finish watching this video. But for the most part, we're going to code the core functionality of the game. And one more thing before we begin, I would like to mention that I am currently working on a web projects tutorial series where I create fun projects using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So if that's something that interests you, please consider subscribing. And you can also check out the other videos on my channel. I have tutorials on Wordle, 2048, Connect 4, Sudoku, and there's more to come. So make sure you subscribe so you can stay up to date. Alright, so after you've downloaded the repo to get the images folder and the background image, make sure you copy and paste those into your directory and create 3 new files: index.html, candy.css, and candy.js. So let's start with the HTML. So doc type, HTML, HTML. In here, we're going to have our head tag and the standard stuff. So meta charset UTF-8. Meta name equals viewport, content is equal to width equals device width, initial scale, we're going to set it to 1.0. Let's give a title to our web page, so title Candy Crush, and then let's link our style sheet and our script. So link rel style sheet href is going to be candy.css and script source candy.js. Alright, so that's it for our head. Now for our body, it's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to have a header tag and we're going to put score, and within it we're going to have a span with an ID of score so that we can access this tag and update the value using JavaScript as we continue playing the game. And then after that, we're just going to do div ID board, and that's it. So we're going to use JavaScript to populate all the candy pieces into that board. Alright, so just go into your folder and just double click on the index.html, and you can see this is what we have so far. Alright, so let's style our web page. So we're going to do body. We're going to change the background to use the image that we have over here. So it's going to look like this. So we're going to do background is equal to URL, and you want to do // and background.jpg. And then we're going to add some other fields. So no repeat, and we're going to center it and keep it in place so it's fixed. And then we're going to make the background size cover. Let's also change the font of our score. So font family is going to be Arial. And let's change the color to white. And then let's do text align center so that all images and text will be aligned in the middle. Alright, so now if you refresh this, you can see we have our background image and we have our score over here. So now let's style our board. So over here, we're going to do board. We're going to style it by giving it a width of 450 pixels and a height of 450 pixels. And we're going to set the background color to a light blue. And let's also add a border around the board. So border is going to be 5 pixel thick. It's going to be solid, and we're going to give it a color of slate gray. Let's also round the edges of our border. So border radius is going to be 10 pixels. Alright, so now if we refresh, you can see we have our board. So it's 450 by 450 pixels. And we have a border around it that is 5 pixel thick. So now what we need to do is center this board. So to do that, we just do margin 0 auto. And let's also do display flex and flex wrap. So that all the candy pieces will appear in line so that they go from left to right instead of going down a single column. So now if I refresh this, you can see we have our board in the center. Now within our board, we're going to have images. So we're going to have image tags for our candy pieces. So this is saying apply this style for all image tags within this board div. Since our board is going to be 9 by 9, meaning 9 pieces by 9 pieces, each piece is going to be 450 divided by 9, which is 50. So each piece is going to have a width of 50 pixels and a height of 50 pixels. Okay. Alright, so for our JavaScript, we're going to start by creating an array called candies. And it's going to be all the colors of the candy pieces. So blue, orange, green, green. What else do we have? Yellow, red, and purple. Okay. So make sure the colors are capitalized because they correspond to the image names. So blue.png, green.png, and so on. And then we're going to have a board. So this is going to be a 2D array that's going to hold all our image tags so that we can access them for crushing the candies and updating the image tags on the web page. So we're going to change the image source every time we crush the candies and generate new ones. So our board is going to be 9 by 9 as we said earlier. So columns equal 9. Let's also add an S here. So 9 rows and 9 columns. And let's also have a variable to keep track of the score. So currently it just starts at 0. Okay, so when the web page loads, we're going to do window.onload. And we're going to call a function called startGame. So this startGame function is going to initialize the board by generating random candies and placing them on the board. So we're going to use a double for loop. So for let r equals 0, r less than rows, r plus plus, and then for let c equals 0, c less than columns, c plus plus. For each row, we're going to have 9 columns. And so let's create a row here. So this is going to be holding all the image tags for that specific row. And then we're going to append it to the board. So at the very end, we're going to have a 2D array or a matrix that is 9 by 9 with this variable board. So let's create a tile document.createElement, and it's going to be an image tag. So what we did here was we created an image tag, and then we're going to do tile.id is equal to r.toString plus dash plus c.toString. So we're going to assign this image tag an ID that will correspond to its coordinates for this 2D array. So first it'll be 0, 0, then 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, and so on. And the reason we're doing this is because when we click on the candy and drag it to another candy, we want to be able to figure out where this image tag is located within the board. So now let's set the source of the image tag to ./images/ so it'll be this folder. And then we're going to get a random candy. So I'm going to create a random candy function. and do plus.jpg, or actually, is it JPEG? No, PNG, sorry. So we're going to do .png. So over here, I'm going to create a random candy function. And it's going to return a random candy from this array. So we're going to do return candies, math.floor, math.random, times candies.length. Okay, so math.random gives you a random number from 0 to 1, but not including 1. So it's going to be a decimal number, and we multiply it by the length. So it's going to be from 0 to 6, but not including 6. So it'll be from 0 to 5.99, and so on. And we're going to use math.floor so that we can get rid of the decimal place. So we're going to get a random candy each time. So now let's say the source is images red.png, or it could be green, purple, or whatever. It's going to be a random color, and it's going to apply a source to that image tag. So now we're going to do document.getElement by ID board. So we're going to get the board div, and we're going to append this tile. So it's going to take this and go to our HTML and append it within here many times. And then let's also add this image tag to our 2D array over here. So we're going to do row.push tile, and then at the end we're going to do board.push row, and then let's print console.log board so we can see what our board looks like. Alright, so if I refresh, you can see we have our random candies, and if I refresh again, you can see that the candies change. So that's good. We have our random candies generated. And if I right click inspect and go to console, you can see we have an array of size 9, and within it we have a 2D array of image tags. And you can see each one has an ID. So this is 00, 01, 02, and it corresponds to their row column indices. Alright, so now that we have a board of random candies, let's add a drag and drop functionality. So to do that, we need to assign a click handler, or an event listener actually. And we need to assign several event listeners. So we're going to do event listener for drag start, and we're going to call a function called drag start. And then we have another one for drag over. We're going to have one for drag enter. We're going to have another for drag leave. And then we have two more. So we're going to have drag end and drag drop. So in this case, it's just called drop, and we're going to call a function called drag drop. So the reason why we have multiple event listeners for the drag and drop function is because drag start is when you click on a candy, and that will initialize the drag process. And then dragging over is when you, after you click the candy, you start moving the mouse while you're still clicking on the candy. So clicking on candy, moving mouse to drag the candy. And then we have drag enter is when you start entering. So you have this image. When you do drag enter, it's basically when your initial candy is about to touch another candy. So dragging candy onto another candy. And then drag leave is when you, it's what it sounds like, you just leave the image there. And then we have drag end, which is at the end of your drag process, what do you do? So in this case, after drag process completed, we swap candies, right? And then we have this drag drop, which actually should go before the drag end, and that is dropping an image, or in this case, dropping a candy over another candy. So let's copy and paste this and move it up here. So you're dropping a candy over another candy, and then you're letting go of that candy. So that's the drag drop. Right, so it's a multi-step process. So for instance, if I click on this orange candy over here, as soon as I click on it, that's drag start. Then when I move it, that's drag over. And then as I get closer, that's enter. And then I leave it, I drop it, and then drag end. You can see it crushes the candies. Okay, so that's the multi-step process for drag and drop. Alright, so let's define these functions. So we're going to have function drag start. And so this is as soon as you click on a candy to drag it. So we're going to have two variables. So let's keep track of the two candies, the one you're dragging and the one you're dropping onto. So we're going to have cur tile and other tile. So cur tile refers to the candy that you're clicking to drag, and the other one is going to be the one that gets dropped on. So it's the target that you're trying to swap with. So here we're going to do cur tile is equal to this. So in this case, this refers to the candy that was clicked on for dragging. Okay, and then now for the next one, we're going to do function drag over. And don't worry about this for now. We're just going to leave it as prevent default. And we're also going to do the same for drag enter. So e.prevent default and drag leave. So we actually don't need these three functions. Well, we do need them for the process, but we're not going to do anything in these functions because we only care about the drag start, the drop, and end. So start, we're going to click on the candy so we can save it in our cur tile variable. And drop is when we drop the candy over another one, and we're going to set other tile to that candy that was dropped on. And then after that, we have drag end, and drag end is what crushes the candy or swaps the candy. So we only care about start, drop, and end. So for drag drop, we're going to do other tile is equal to this. So this refers to the target tile that was dropped on. And then finally we have our drag end, which is when we actually do the swapping. So in this case, because we have tiles, we're not going to swap the tags themselves. We're going to swap their image sources. So we're going to do let cur image is equal to cur tile.source, and let other image equal to other tile.source. And then here we're going to swap the images. So cur tile.source is going to be other image, and other tile.source is going to be cur image. Alright, so when we refresh, you can see we can drag and drop. We can switch two candies, and actually right now we can swap with another candy that's far away. For instance, this green one, we can swap with this blue one on the top right. And you can see that's an issue because in Candy Crush, you're only allowed to swap with candies above, below, to the left, or to the right of you. So let's fix that. So what we're going to do is check for adjacency. So to do that, we need to grab the coordinates, and luckily with the cur tile and other tile, where we have the image tags, we have our ID. So the ID corresponds to the row and column coordinates. So let's grab the ID. So we're going to do let cur chords is equal to cur tile.id.split by that dash. So the ID would be like 0, 0. And then we're going to take it and split it by the dash so that it returns an array of two strings, 0 and 0, like this. And so we need r equals parse int of cur chords of 0. So that's row. And let's do the same thing for columns. Cur chords of 1. And let's do the same thing for the other tile. So let other chords equal to other tile.id.split. We're going to get the row and column. So R2 is going to be parse int of other chords of 0. And C2 is going to be parse int of other chords of 1. Okay, so now we have the row and columns for both the current candy and the other candy. So now we need to check for adjacency. So let's check for left to check to see if the target candy is to the left of the current candy. We're going to do if C2 is equal to C minus 1 and they are in the same row. So R equals R2. And let's also do the same for move right. So C2 is equal to C plus 1 and R is equal to R2. Now for move up, we're going to do R2 is equal to R minus 1 and C is equal to C2. So they're in the same column except R2 is above R. So that's why it's equal to R minus 1. And we're going to do the same thing for move down. R2 is equal to R plus 1 and C is equal to C2. Okay, so now we're going to have is adjacent equal to move left or move right or move up or move down. So it's one of these four directions. So we're going to put this inside a conditional statement. So if is adjacent, then perform the swap. Alright, so now if I refresh, you can see if I try to swap this blue one with this yellow one here, it won't work. It won't swap with anything else, but it can swap with this. Okay, so you can only swap with the ones adjacent to you. Alright, looks good. So now let's actually start crushing the candies. So here I'm going to write a function for crush candy. And there are many ways to crush candies. So you can do 3 in a row, 4 in a row, or 5 in a row. In this tutorial, I'm just going to do 3 in a row to keep it simple. But you can do 5 in a row here, and then 4 in a row here later. And then you can also apply the combinations if you want. For now, we're just going to do crush 3. So I'm going to create a function called crush3. So let's do that here. Function crush3. So first we're going to check the rows, and we're going to do for let r equals 0, r less than rows, r plus plus, for let c equals 0, c less than columns, c plus plus. We're going to check every 3 candies. So in this case, because we're going to check 2 of head to do the comparison, we're going to do -2 here. So we're going to check each candy with 2 ahead of the current candy. So let candy 1 equal to board of RC. Let candy 2 is equal to board of RC plus 1. And let candy 3 equal to board of RC plus 2. So in here, I'm going to check to see if their image sources are the same. And if so, we're going to crush the candies. So if candy1.source is equal to candy2.source, and candy2.source is equal to candy3.source, and not candy1.source that includes blank. When we crush the candy, we're going to replace the image of the tile to a blank image. So in this case, the blank image will be the background color. So I have it here. It's going to be the same light blue I did in CSS over here. And the reason we're using this dummy image workaround is because if I just set the image source to an empty string, it's going to have that icon on the image that says image source not found. So we want it to be completely blank so that it looks like the candy was crushed. The candy's not there. And there should be nothing there except the background color. So we're going to do candy1.source is equal to /images/blank.png. And we're going to copy and paste this and do the same for candy 2 and 3. Okay. And then now let's do the same for the columns. So we're going to do check columns. So for let C equals 0, C less than columns, C++. For let R equals 0, R less than rows minus 2. So again, within the columns, we're going to check 2 ahead of the current candy. So that's why we need to do minus 2 so that we don't go out of bound. So we're going to do let candy1 is equal to board of R, C. Let candy2 equal to board of R plus 1, C. And let candy3 equal to board of R plus 2, C. And then we're going to do the same check. So let's copy and paste that and put it here. Alright, so now we have our crush3 function completed. So now let's go over here, and within our window.onload, I'm going to add window.setInterval, and I'm going to call a function, and within that setInterval function, I'm going to call crush candy. So it's going to call crush candy, and it will, for the time being, call crush3. So in here, I want to specify the interval seconds. So I'm going to do 100 milliseconds. So what this does is it's going to, for every 100 milliseconds, so every 1/10 of a second, it's going to call this function. And within this function, we have our crush candy function. So every 1/10 of a second is going to call crush candy. Okay. So if I refresh now, you can see the candies got crushed. I can swap, let's see, swap these two, and you can see the candies get crushed, and these two, and so on. So every 1/10 of a second, candies are being crushed. Now there's an issue here, and that is I can move that candy, as you saw, I can swap it with the blank tile. So that shouldn't be allowed. So let's go and fix that. So within here, I want to check to see if the candy that I'm swapping with is a valid move. And a valid move is basically if I swap the candy with another one, it should crush something, right? There should be 3 in a row at least so that it is a valid move. So here I'm going to do function check valid, and we're just going to do the same thing we did here, where we iterate through the board. So let's highlight this, press Shift and Tab at the same time, and then here, instead of changing the image source, we're just going to return true. Same thing over here, return true. So this means we found a combination of 3 in a row or 3 in a single column that we can crush. So instead of crushing them like we did here, we just return true. So at the end here, we're going to return false if we didn't find any combination. And then over here, I'm going to do let valid move is going to be check valid. So if not valid move, this means that I tried to swap and nothing could be crushed, then I'm going to swap back. So I'm just going to copy and paste this and put it here. Okay. And while we're at it, let's also add an additional check. So when drag ends, we want to make sure that the current tile and the other tile selected, neither of them were blank. So we're going to do if current tile dot source that includes blank, or other tile dot source that includes blank. So one of them was a blank tile. We're just going to return. So none of this swapping ever happens. So this right here is going to check to make sure we don't swap a candy with a blank tile. And over here, we want to make sure that when we swap with 2 candies, we can crush 3 in a row at least, or 3 in a column. Okay, so that's what these 2 checks I added in drag in does. Alright, so now if I refresh, you can see I can't swap with these, this red and yellow one, but I can swap here, and you can see the candies get crushed, and then I can crush these 2, and these 2, and so on. And yeah, so now what we need to do is we need to slide the candies down. Alright, so to slide the candy, we need to create a function, slide candy. And we're going to iterate through each column. So C less than columns, C++. And let's create a variable, index. And it's going to be rows minus 1. So it's going to start at the bottom of each column and go up. So for let r is equal to columns minus 1, r greater or equal to 0, r minus minus. So in this case, minus means going up. Over here, we're going to make a check. So if not board of rc.source.includes blank. So if it's not blank, that means it's a candy. So what we're going to do is we're going to do board of ind c.source, which is the current blank tile. We're going to set the image to that candy. And then we're going to move the blank tile up by 1. Alright, so basically what we just did was, for instance, if we took column c equals 2, which is this one over here, our index variable would be over here. So we are checking as we go up the rows. This is blank, this is blank, this is blank, and then we hit this green candy. It is not blank. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that image and set the source for this last blank index. And then now we increment that up. And then we do the same thing with this yellow. And then we do the same thing with the blue. And then we do the same thing with the red. So we're repeating this for each column. And after we've finished dragging the images down, we have these leftovers over here that we need to take care of, because our last blank tile is telling us that we left off over here. So we need to do a cleanup and set these 4 to blank tiles. So over here, I'm going to do for let r equals ind, r is greater or equal to 0, and r minus minus. So basically where we left off for our last blank tile, we're going to set each one board of rc.source to /images blank.png. So it's going to set each one to a blank tile. And then similar to crush candy, we're going to add slide candy down here. So every time we crush candy, we want to slide the candies down. Alright, so let's refresh, and you can see the candies slide down. And over here, if I swap, you can see the candies slide down, and so on. Okay, so now what we need to do is generate new candies. So over here, I'm going to do function generate candy. And we're only going to generate for the first row. And the reason is because we're going to call our generate candy function over here, and it's going to happen after slide candy. So every time we crush, we slide, we generate, and then it repeats the process every 10th of a second. So that's why we only need to generate for the top row, because slide candy is going to slide the candy down for us. So here we're going to do for let c equals 0, c less than columns, c++, if board of 0c, so 0 is the first row, dot source dot includes blank. This means there's a blank tile. We're going to set the source random candy. Okay. So it's this random candy function that we created earlier. Alright, so if I refresh, you can see candies get crushed, candies above get slide down, and then new ones get generated. So it gets repeated, and we can play the game like this. And you can see as we crush candies, the candies slide down, and new ones get generated. So now all that's left to do is to update our score. So what I'm going to do is whenever you crush 3 in a row, I'm just going to do score plus equal to 30. And when you create your crush 4 or crush 5, you can determine how much score to give. It's all up to you. In this case, I'm just going to leave it as 30. And then over here, I'm going to do document.getElementById score, which is that span tag. And I'm going to set the inner text to be score. Okay, so I'm going to get this span, and I'm going to update this 0 to reflect the new score. Alright, so if I refresh, you can see the score actually goes up, and I can keep playing, and so on, and the score will keep going up. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this tutorial. We have ourselves a fully functional game of Candy Crush. So before we wrap up this video, I just want to show you something. So this is a Candy Crush game that I made a year or 2 ago, and I want to give you some ideas for enhancements that you can do. So one enhancement you can do is keep track of the turns. So you can see if I swap any 2 pieces of candy, it consumes a turn. So in this case, in my version of Candy Crush, the goal is to get the highest score possible within 20 turns. And another enhancement you can do is crush 4 in a row, crush 5 in a row. And when you crush 4 in a row, you can either create a vertical or horizontal candy piece. And if I continue playing, if I do the swap here, you can see this entire column gets destroyed because of that single vertical candy piece. And so you can play around with the different crush combinations. So if I can drag this candy over here, and then I can move the red here, and I get the chocolate ball. And yeah, you can find the link to my game also in the video description. So you can actually play if you want. And you can also, I guess if you want, you can try to get a high score and try to beat my score. But I just want you to just play around with this and see what features you can add to your own personal game of Candy Crush. Okay, so that's something you should consider doing. Just making enhancements to what we made in this tutorial, and then maybe you can add it to your resume. And yeah, hopefully you found this video tutorial helpful and you were able to make this Candy Crush game. And if you found the video interesting as well, please consider subscribing, leave a like, and let me know what you thought of the tutorial down below in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video.